Well, good afternoon, good evening, and for some of you, perhaps it's a good bit later in the evening. You know, we've chosen today to take a look at why Trisomy 21 kids deserve a better prognosis. Well, first, I want to welcome everyone to the Institute and to say that we know many of you are old friends. You know the Institute very well. I hope you're not getting the same echo where you are that I'm getting where we are. The Institutes for the Achievement of Human Potential have been here for almost 70 years, and we treat brain injury kids. I'm the director. I've been the director for quite a while, over 3 decades. And I've had great good fortune to be raised here. It was my father who in 1955 founded the Institutes. The echo is about to disappear, I hope. Yes. Okay. I hope you weren't bothered by that echo, but I was bothered by it. My father founded the Institutes in 1955, and at that in those early days, we did not treat children. We treated adults. It was a classical rehabilitation center, and we did that for a number of years until we were so impressed with the results that we got with 60, 70, and 80-year-olds that we said, "What's happening to the 3-year-olds across the street that are ending up in institutions? Well, we're fixing 70-year-olds." That didn't seem quite right. So gradually over time, the kids kind of took over. And those kids came here with every conceivable problem, uh, all the way from kids in a coma, kids who were blind, deaf, paralyzed, kids who came running through the door, but who had huge problems of focus, concentration, huge visual problems, auditory problems. Kids who came here who looked like every other kid, but who just couldn't make it to school. In short, from the most hurt kid you can imagine, moving back and forth between life and death, all the way to the kid who's almost perfect, but not quite. And that not quite in an academic setting will mean that he will fail. Those are our kids. And those kids arrive with a vast array of symptomatic labels: cerebral palsy, autism, global developmental delay, ADD, ADHD, hyperactive, epileptic, all these labels. There are more than 300. But every one of these kids arriving here with those labels, after a careful neurological evaluation, we will find to be brain injury. That is hurt in the central nervous system, not in the elbow, not in the knee, but in the central nervous system. And that's really been a huge, huge difference between our way of looking at our kids and everybody else. Because in the world of hurt kids, there's a huge amount of attention paid to symptoms, but not much paid to where is the problem and how are we going to treat it. Now, where does the trisomy 21 kid come into this? Well, before I address that, I want to introduce someone who's going to be helping us today. She is Alisa Guerra, not only an old friend of mine in the institutes, but she really has two claims to our attention. First, she came here as a mom, and she understood the program. She came here as a mom of well kids, wanting to be able to take the work we had learned about her kids and apply it to her well children. What a good idea. She did that very faithfully, and she now has 3 young adults who are, frankly, spectacular. She then was inspired by that, and she realized where she came from in Mexico, that there really weren't the kind of schools that she needed and wanted to have in order to put her kids in school and have them prosper and flourish. So she actually created her own school that followed the basic philosophy that the institute taught. And then that school became 2 schools and then 3 schools. I've lost count of the schools now. And along the way, Elisa's kind of taken it on her shoulders to educate teachers. We're in the parent world. We're nose to nose with parents. But Elisa is helping to teach teachers how to do a better job in the class. So welcome, Elisa. She's here to help me. And her job basically is to keep me from talking too much, and keep us moving on to the next. Because every point we could talk for a long time about each.
Because
So
every point
today
is
is about
important.
trisomy 21. And, you know, there are many reasons why I chose this topic for today. But one that comes to mind right off the bat is the kids who arrive here with trisomy 21 as a diagnosis are the only kids who arrive here with a real diagnosis. That is a real diagnosis. And it is an accurate diagnosis. That is what their problem is. So in that way, they are different than all the other kids we see because very few kids arrive here with a real diagnosis. It's all symptomatic labels. There are some other big differences for trisomy 21 children. And as for a bad prognosis, I think uniformly the parents of trisomy 21 kids are given a very bad prognosis. This is the only group of kids whose parents start to hear that bad prognosis before the child is even born. Yikes. Before the baby even arrives. In fact, and I wasn't fully aware of this until a few years ago. I don't know what world I was living in, but a mother handed me an article, and it was an interview with 3 mothers who had all had trisomy 21 babies. And they were simply telling the story of what happened from the time they were pregnant and they knew they were gonna have a trisomy 21 baby till the baby was born. And it was all 3 stories were essentially the same. From the moment they knew they had a trisomy 21 baby, healthcare professionals all around, nurses, doctors, therapists, would come up to them and say, it's not too late to terminate this baby. And they were very clear with everyone to say, no, I'm keeping my baby. I have no intention of terminating this baby. And yet this went on and on, right up to a month before the baby is due, the nurse calling mom on the phone and saying, it's still not too late. I don't know what she was thinking. I had a mother as recently as 3 weeks ago say that she was in the hospital in labor and they were still at her. Now, I just, I can't wrap my brain around that. That to me is absolutely, utterly unthinkable.
It is, and this is a story that we also hear, maybe not so much in Latin America, but of course, what you are referring to as giving the child a prognosis even before he or she is born. I could not think of a worse nightmare. I mean, this is an unborn baby who is already has a label to his neck. I would love to, Janet, first of all, to say that I am blessed and happy to be here at the Institute with you. You are there in the auditorium. I am just some steps away from you in the boardroom. But given that we are here in this place, that is a place of sanity, um, could you introduce us to your father and maybe the story of how we at the institutes came to begin treating trisomy 21 kids? Because it was not that we treated them from the beginning.
No, no, it's absolutely true. And it would be virtually impossible for me to address this particular group of parents of these kids without first addressing the history with my father and what happened with trisomy 21 kids. Because if you go back in our history, we did not accept these kids on our program, in 1960. We did not, because we thought, well, they're a genetic problem.
Mhm.
We don't treat genes. We didn't treat genes then. We don't treat them now. We have no knowledge in that area at all. And so we did not accept them. It was, I think, inevitable that at some point, parents of these babies would find us. And of course they did. And the very first couple that came with their baby said to my father, please, will you accept our baby on your program? And my father said, we don't know how to fix genes. It's not what we do. And they said, you know about development. And our baby needs what you have. It can only help him. It could not hurt him. And they are telling us to put him in an institution. He's only a baby. Well, my father's answer was also inevitable, because you should know about my father. If you had to describe him in one word, I think you could do it. And it would be the word yes. My father loved the word yes, and he hated the word no. So he said yes to that family. And we evaluated that baby just as we evaluate every child we see. We measured that baby as we measure every child we see. And we outlined a very clear program, an intellectual program, a physical program, a physiological program. And as we sent every other kid home to get their program done, we sent that baby home. And it was not long before we had a second kid and a third kid and a fourth kid. I think we're up to probably half dozen trisomy 21 babies on the program. And my dad's medical staff started to give him a bad time. They said, we hear you're accepting kids with genetic problems, and we can't do that. That's not, we don't solve genetic problems. So my father listened to them patiently, and he said, well, I have to say to you, these kids, when we evaluate them on our profile, they look just like other midbrain injured kids. These are pretty much midbrain injured kids. And when we outline a program and they do it, they get results and they go up that profile just like the other kids were treated. So he was not happy with what they said, but they gave him a very bad time. They said, you're going to get us in trouble. We're already the mavericks in the field, and you're going to make our life more difficult. So my father went to the very best person he could go to in the whole world, Imundo Veras. Imundo Veras was my father's chosen brother. He was a Brazilian doctor who had brought his son here to our rehabilitation center. His son had broken his neck and was paralyzed from the neck down. We reevaluated him and said, we think it's not a total severing. We think we can get function back from the waist up. My father and that early team successfully did that. And his son was able to regain function. And, you know, the difference between being a quadriplegic and being a paraplegic is the difference between the ability really to have a life and
Yes.
to not have much of a life. So Raimundo was so grateful. He took his son back to Brazil. His son went on to finish high school, to go to university, to go to medical school, and became actually the medical director of the Institutes for the Achievement of Human Potential in Brazil, which Raimundo founded. So by the time this controversy had come up over the trisomy 21 babies, we had quite a beautiful institutes right in Rio de Janeiro. So my father said, Raimundo, I want you to do me a favor. And I know this story is true because I was sitting in the taxi with my father and Raimundo as we went to the airport, and they hatched this plot. And the plot was simple. He said, Raimundo, I want you to go back to Brazil, and I want you to accept 100 trisomy 21 babies on the program. And Raimundo said, done. Of course, I will be happy to. And he said, you won't get any trouble from your medical director, will you? And Raimundo laughed because he said, trouble? My medical director is my son. I don't think he's going to give me a bad time. So we knew that would work. You know, Raimundo, this was typical of Raimundo. He did not go home and accept 100 kids. He went home and accepted 200. And a year later, he marched back into this very room and gave a lecture where I'm standing right now. And he said to our medical team and to our World Organization members who were there for our annual meeting, he said, these kids, not only should we be accepting these kids, but we have the great good fortune because of their problem, we can get them early.
Mm-hmm.
We can get them right, you know, when they're a few months old or even from birth. And if we do get them early, then the goal from day one must be wellness.
Yes.
There should be no other goal for them. And shame on us if we can't achieve that. So he gave our medical staff a very bad time. You know, from that day to this, to honor him, and I think to honor these kids, our nickname for our trisomy 21 kids, Veras kids. Everybody at these institutes and around the world refers to our trisomy 21 kids as Veras kids.
And
go ahead.
No. I was just going to say, what is the difference between what the world does about trisomy 21 children and what we do at the institutes? Of course, you just said we do not treat genetic problems, but then what do we treat?
Well, you know, even when parents come here with a Veras kid, they maybe spend the first day in our course saying, where do we fit in? Our kid has a genetic problem. Nobody else here does. I think what we learned, both from the first 6 kids we treated and then from those 200, and we've learned it every day since, is that Veras kids have 2 big problems. One, everybody knows, the trisomy 21. That's the
Okay.
genetic problem. But that problem causes a very significant neurological problem, a problem to the brain. And it turns out that of these 2 big problems, the biggest and the most important one to solve is the problem with the brain. Because if we fix that, we can get that kid moving up that developmental profile rapidly, and many kids assuming their rightful place side by side with their brothers and sisters, and looking as well as the next kid, if not better, because
Do,
our goals are high.
do you have an example, a case story or something that maybe you can walk us through what it looks like to be on the program, on the Institute's program with a Veras child?
Yes, and we have so many that
Okay.
when I was preparing for this, it was difficult because, honestly, these are wonderful kids and we have wonderful parents. So to just do one, I thought, well, maybe I'll do 2 or 3. And then I realized there's not enough time. So
Right.
I've chosen one, and I chose this one, not so much for the child herself, because all of the kids that I could have chosen have done well. I chose this one because I have the words of mother herself. It's really written completely by mom. And so I'd like to read her words to present this case history.
Sure. Please go ahead.
Now, this is the story of Sarah. And before Sarah was born, her family was enjoying health and happiness with her 2 older sisters. They didn't know that the birth of the 3rd child would present huge challenges, or that meeting those challenges would lead them to become an extraordinary family. Almost 10 years after the birth of their 2nd daughter, mother learned she was pregnant again. Parents were told that due to their ages, there's a risk of having a baby with a chromosomal abnormality. But they decided not to have the amniocentesis test. On the day of Sarah's birth, her parents were told she had trisomy 21. This was difficult news for them. Recalling the challenge they faced, mother writes, "We started to look for help and information to learn what we could do for our baby. We became very confused because every doctor had a different opinion and none of them had any answers. As time went by, we did see how our Sarah was not developing as she should. Even to feed her was a difficult task. A friend gave us the book, What to Do About Your Brain and Your Child. Everything became clear. We finished the book and said, this is what we've been looking for. Immediately, we began a program following the book. Very bright parents to read that book and understand it did apply to their girl. We went to the institutes in Philadelphia with Sarah when she was 7 months old, and then a really new life began. Sarah couldn't move by herself, even 1 centimeter. It was a tremendous moment when, for the first time in her life, she crawled 2 feet. We saw this with tears in our eyes and realized we were on the right path for her. Every month, Sarah improved. We began to see we have a child, not a problem. And with every visit to the institutes, we had increasing hope. In mobility, Sarah began to crawl, then to creep, then to walk, and then to run. We and Sarah's sisters made sure she made every goal that was set for her. She led us to understand the brain and human potential. And she led us to this island of hope at the institutes. To develop her mobility, we used tunnels and kittens and lots of love and encouragement. Sarah is 9 years old and running 5 kilometers every day. Mom is in great shape too, by the way. To develop her vision, Sarah began watching a spotlight on the ceiling and then big shapes. Eventually, she was reading big red words and phrases before she was even 2 years old. Before the program, Sarah's eyes crossed severely. Now her eyes are straight without any surgery. So you can see she has a severe convergent strabismus. Now her eyes are straight without any surgery. Very often they try to go in and correct this by nipping the muscles of the eye and pulling the eye out. This surgery does not work. 3 months later, 4 months later, the eyes will be right back where they were because the problem is not in the muscles. The muscles are normal. The problem is in the brain. She is reading commercial books and is well above age level in reading. She is fluent in Spanish and is learning English. Sarah began to write when she was only 5 years old. When Sarah was a baby, we had her hang on a bar. Now she brachiates on an overhead ladder, forwards, backwards, and twisting in circles. And that's no easy feat. Sarah began gymnastics when she was 4 years old. Today, she's a good gymnast and enjoys swimming as well. She's clearly above her peers physically. Sarah is a lovely girl. She puts a touch of heaven in everything she does. She changed our family completely from being an ordinary family to being an extraordinary family. And here is Sarah, a beautiful teenager.
Wow. Wow. Such an inspiring story, Janet. And I am fortunate to say that I was able to meet Sarah and her parents during one of our courses when the What to Do About Your Brain and Your Child course happened online, pre-pandemic times in Mexico City. She came to give us a demonstration of what these children can achieve. And the whole audience was in awe of her. Such a beautiful and capable young lady. Very different from the prognosis that many children receive before they are born, as you were saying at the beginning of this conversation. So, taking into account what Sarah showed us that these children can achieve, what do you think, or what does the institutes think should be the prognosis for trisomy 21 children?
Well, I think that Sarah answered that and her parents answered that. The prognosis should be that, or the goal should be that these children should live the same life their brothers and sisters live, instead of looking into a crystal ball that doesn't exist. We don't have a crystal ball, but somehow the healthcare professionals seeing these parents look into their crystal ball and see all of these dark things for the future. We would say, if you're going to look into that crystal ball, see a bright future. See a kid who has the potential to read, to write, to run, to be a gymnast, to be a swimmer, to be a dancer, to be a painter. The same vision you would have for the well kids in the family, you should have for these kids, because otherwise it's really a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, they arrive at birth and then they're treated differently from birth.
Yes.
If you took the kid next to them in the hospital nursery, who everybody assumes is an average kid, and you treated that baby in that abnormal way, then that baby's not going to achieve as well as that baby should. So basically, it is looking at these kids with clean eyes and saying, yeah, they've got a genetic problem. And there may be other problems that go along with that. Sometimes
That's
Vera's
right.
kids have heart problems. Sometimes
Mhm.
they have specific physiological problems that you have to deal with, but their neurological problems are fixable. We have not ever changed a single gene in our history, but we've seen lots of Veras kids go to school, graduate from high school, get
From
a
college.
degree,
Yes.
live a real life.
Yes. It's not just Sarah, of course. I have been very blessed to get to know some other kids in our program. I remember, for example, Ariel from Costa Rica. This is a young man that can speak 4 languages and works for IBM. And he's also a very active physically and has lots of friends. And there's also from Italy, Francesco, who I believe was the second person in his country with this label of Down syndrome or trisomy 21 to get his college degree in economics, no less.
Yes.
But anyway, this is such a hot topic, and our parents are so interested that we thought that we could make kind of a composite of questions with the most asked questions by
Yeah,
parents of a trisomy 21 children. So, Janet, maybe we can go to those questions now,
sure.
if you agree. And here we have the first one. Is nutrition an important factor for Vera's kids? We know, for example, for the so-called autistic, we kind of accept that that's important. It's the same thing with Vera's kids.
It's very, very important for our Veras kids. And luckily, we very frequently get our Veras kids right at birth or in the first 12 months of life. So we have the opportunity to make sure that that baby is going to be on breast milk, not formula, because dairy is particularly hard on Vera's kids. As soon as when the kids who come here on dairy, as soon as we take that out, they're going to do much better. We also found that there were certain supplements that were particularly helpful to our Vera's kids. And vitamin C occurs to me because I remember, now going back 25 or 30 years, we did a small study on vitamin C and the different types of children we were treating. And we were surprised to see that the need for this supplement in very young Veras kids was quite a bit higher than we thought it was. So yes, we certainly want to get our Veras kids on a very good nutritional program very, very early on. Another aspect of doing that as quickly as possible is that our Veras kids, just like all kids, are very good at running the show. And they're particularly good at running the show when it comes to food. So they can be very dictatorial and intimidating to an intimidating degree. And mothers end up, you know, blending their food until they're 5 years old and things that it's not needed, but the kid has really bulldozed mother into these things. So the earlier we see our kids, the sooner we can make sure that doesn't happen.
And here is another question that you kind of already answered, but I want to touch it again because it's so frequent. And that question is, what is the single biggest problem for Vera's kids?
Well, I don't think there's any question that the answer is respiration. Vera's kids do not have good breathing. Their breathing is shallow, their breathing is immature, it can be irregular. So, from the moment a Vera's kid arrives here, we are addressing that issue of building a big chest, getting that child crawling and creeping and walking and running. Anything we can do to get active respiration for him and oxygenation for the brain. These are very powerful tools in the toolbox for the Veras kid.
Great, and I love to revisit this idea that we propose at the institutes. That of course, the structure of the body, including the lungs, is it's a product of the function that we give those lungs. Function determines structure, and maybe we will have time to go back to that idea some other time. But now I want to go ahead to the next question. Are all Veras kids alike? If they have the same genetic problem, does it mean that all of them have the same symptoms and get the same treatment?
Well, I would say the spirit of this question, I think, is often that they're kind of made out of a cookie cutter, and nothing could be further from the truth. We've actually seen Veras kids who were blind and paralyzed. Not many. For the most part, Veras kids are in the higher end of moderate and sometimes mild compared to many of the kids we see who are paralyzed and speechless. But they can have very large problems. So I think the world thinks they're all the same. They're not at all. They're quite different. I would say the way they are alike is our prognosis. If we're going to talk in a broad brushstroke now, not about an individual child, but just to generalize, we would say they're like in that we would say when we see these kids, we are 100% optimistic that we can make them not only better, but much, much, much better. And that way they're alike. We expect them to succeed. We expect them to do well.
Okay, well, now it's time for your questions. We have an audience listening to us. Thank you for everyone that has joined this live conversation. And also thanks to the people that are watching this later on. That you are, if you are watching the recording, even if you did not get to catch the live presentation, you can still type in your questions, please, because we go over the questions that you post and we make them a topic for one of our next conversations. So please go ahead right now, whether you are live or not, to post your questions. And I have already two of them, Janet. So
Okay.
I will show them to you, and you decide which one you take first. We have here from MFZ. Do the speech problems arise from the brain? Do your programs help with speech? And then we have another from Laura Beal. This may or may not be a question you will be answering, but I wanted to ask if you still believe that traditional therapy has a valuable role in helping children with trisomy 21 in combo with Doman programs. So, what do you think, Janet? Which
So
one do you?
the first question, which is about speech problems, about language development takes place in the brain. And if the brain is injured, then, and we can make the brain better, is it going to change language development? Of course it will. And it takes us back to what we were just talking about. A big part of the language problems for Veras kids is breathing. You know, this is again, we would say the world looks at Veras kids kind of upside down. They see kids who can't speak or who can't speak very well. And they say, well, he's not very bright. You know, he's got problems. You know, if we're talking about the brain, the world would look at him as a cortical problem, more problems in the cortex. We found just the opposite. The problem is lower in the brain. It's not intelligence, it's breathing. If you can't breathe deeply, if you can't breathe regularly, then you're going to have a lot of trouble with speech. When you do talk, it might not be very clear. It's a much greater effort to talk. And you're probably not going to want to talk as much because it is such a great effort. So as soon as you start fixing those respiratory problems, as soon as you get better oxygenation for the brain, then you see speech start to change. And of course, it doesn't hurt that at the same time you're teaching that little Veras kid who might be 10 months, 14 months, 20 months, you're teaching that baby to read. So you're putting language in,
In.
and you're putting it in a very clear, precise, discrete way, and building a sophisticated vocabulary. So when he does speak, he is pretty sophisticated in his speech.
Well, questions are popping around. Of course, we still have Laura's question,
Yeah.
but you want to go ahead, or maybe I show you the other two questions that
Well,
are
hold on, and I'll do Laura's.
okay.
Again, it is our experience of many years that the conventional treatment that exists is designed for the periphery. It is designed if you have a sports injury, and physical therapy is the way to go. That's what it's designed for. But if the injury is in the central nervous system, then you cannot treat the symptom and expect the problem to go away. So, no, we would not try to combine a treatment that's for the periphery. We don't find our kids have peripheral problems. We are treating the central nervous system, and it's two very, very different things. So we would say to any family, decide where, if you believe your child has a problem with the arm or the elbow or the leg or the tongue, but for brain injured kids, they do not have problems with in the eyeball or the knee or they have a problem in the brain. And like it or don't, got to treat the brain if you want the problem to go away.
Brain injury is in the brain, and the brain grows by use. Those are some of your father's
yes,
favorite words of mine. Well, let me show you a couple more questions. Rose Beatty says, digestive problems, infrequent pooping, how can it be addressed? And then we have Kale asking, how are their needs change or different in adolescence, nutritional? My son has been following your program since an infant. And sorry, I just want to go back to one question for a few weeks earlier that I think we did not get to address. Giselle had asked, my baby was born with Down syndrome. She's 4 weeks old. Is there something we could do? And if so, how soon could we start? And I think that also goes nicely with the question that many parents have is, okay, I have this baby that has been diagnosed with trisomy 21. Now what? What do I do? So Janet, go to any of the questions that you want.
Okay. Well, let's go back to the first two questions, and we'll end with what do you do next. I think that makes sense.
Okay.
So, digestive problems. Well, these are very common in brain injured children. It's a very rare brain injured child who doesn't come through the door here with some kind of digestive problem. And again, we would look first at the diet. We would do very specific things with the diet. We addressed some of those things last week in the webinar, so I strongly recommend going back to that webinar on 4 fixes for the brain. Those 4 things will help a Veras child very, very much, and you may get a big change in constipation. And of course, you saw with Sarah's program, we immediately got her on her belly, we got her crawling, and she did as much crawling as possible. Do you think that's going to change her ability to move her bowels? Of course it does. So I would say those 2 things are really big. But if you didn't see that webinar last week, I really recommend those 4 items that we talked about last week because they'll really help you.
Yes, the last week's webinar was solely on nutrition, and of course, this is a huge topic for digestive problems. Kale's question is up now. How do their needs change or are different?
Well, again, it really depends on where a child is in his development on our developmental profile. If we're looking at a kid who has really graduated from our program, he's already neurologically at the top of the profile, then I don't think his needs are going to be any different, really, than any kid of his age. It might be that he has to be more careful about his diet. It might be that he has to really keep a good physical program all the time. We recommend that for all of our graduates, whether they're Veras kids, whether they're midbrain injured kids, posterior cortical midbrain, regardless of the etiology. or the area of injury, it's a good idea to keep a good, clean diet, no junk, no sugar, low salt, good hydration,
Which is
and
for
a
everyone.
consistent physical program, which is what everybody should be doing. But I
Yeah,
think
that's
for a herd kid, for a Veras kid, you know, you're going to need that discipline your whole life. That's a good discipline to keep in your whole life. I think that if the child is an adolescent and still has very large neurological problems, then I think a program designed to knock off those problems one by one is going to be very important. Very important.
Yes, we cannot say that everyone's the same because, of course, even though they have trisomy 21, you said it before, it's not a cookie cutter kind of thing. Every child needs its their own diagnosis and program. I think that we can go to Giselle's question now, which sums up nicely
Oh,
what do we do next. But of course, parents, keep your questions coming. As we said before, even if we do not have enough time to get to your questions, we still might. But even if we do not have time, we will always use your questions in upcoming conversation series. So please don't be shy. Pop your questions now. And we go to Giselle's question. What do I do next?
well, it's absolutely the right question. And beyond a shadow of a doubt, the best thing for you to do when we're all done here this afternoon, we're going to give you a link, and that link will take you to a Calendly calendar where you can find a day and time, and we hope sooner the better, so that you can schedule a telephone conversation with our staff. Now, you're going to talk to Jackie Johnston. She's a mother of a brain injured child herself, and who successfully took her kid all the way. And she can answer a huge number of your questions. If you have clinical questions, she's going to put you in touch with a highly experienced child brain developmentalist to answer those questions. Let me say to you what I hope will happen after you have that conversation. That's the first thing to do, and I would do it sooner rather than later. We have two courses that are of the greatest importance for our Veras kids. The big course is what to do about your brain injured child. And that course is our oldest course, our most important course. And the sooner parents get to that course and that's online now. So you used to have to fight your way into the Valentine Auditorium. Now you can get into the Valentine Auditorium right from your living room, which is a wonderful thing. And, we're thrilled that we can do that. So I would say that's the big goal, to get into that course as soon as possible. But for our parents of Veras kids, we created a course. Actually, we did this course in China. We used to do it in Singapore, Tokyo. I don't know why we didn't do it here, but we didn't. For at least 10 years, we did this course in those countries. And this was a course for newborn babies. And it taught mom exactly what to do from the moment the baby's born until the baby's 12 months old. Literally, and it has a beautiful kit of materials that goes with it, a beautiful book. It's virtually a textbook called How Smart Is Your Baby? And it's really an owner's manual for a baby is what it is. So we did this in China, but why we didn't do it here, I don't know. When COVID came along, we got the bright idea, let's do it here as well, and let's do it online. And that's what we do as frequently throughout the year. And this course is only 8 hours. That's a very short course for us, very short. And here's a funny thing that happened. The very first time we gave that course live online here, when we looked up at the screen and we went around the room and said, why are you here? Half of the mothers expected they were either pregnant or they had a newborn baby. The other half were mothers who had trisomy 21 babies. Now, we had not promoted the course in any way for parents of Veras kids because it actually didn't occur to us. But mothers heard about the course and they came. And what a brilliant thing that was, because some of the mothers in that course, the kid was still in utero. So mother would be ready right on day one to have perfect stimulation, perfect opportunity, and enriched environment for that baby. Do you think those babies do well? Oh my goodness.
I'm sure they
So
did.
one of the things that I want you to think about is that course, because it's only 8 hours. It's 2 mornings, usually a Thursday and a Friday morning. That's helpful to the parents who live in a time difference of 12 hours. They still have to take it pretty late at night, but it's doable. And then you would have a beginning point. Right now, the next scheduled newborn course is the 28th of March. But, if there is enough demand, I would put another one between now and then, because that's a long way off. So put that in the back of your head. Put the book, How Smart Is Your Baby, right there front and center. If you know you're going to have a trisomy 21 kid, or if you already do and they're under 12 months. And then also, of course, if they're over 12 months, then get yourself to the What to Do About Your Brain and Your Child course as fast as possible. That's the answer. That's
And
the
I
source.
just wanted to say that the What to Do About Your Brain in Your Child course, we have it online in English and Spanish. If by any chance you are listening to this conversation and you can understand English, but you feel mostly at ease in Spanish, if Spanish is your native language, we do have the course with translation to Spanish. And right now, as we speak, we are also working on having the newborn course in Spanish as well. So hopefully by March, when the next course comes,
Yes.
we will have it available in Spanish as well. And yes, the book in Spanish is called Si su bebé es un genio, in case you are listening to this in Spanish, or How Smart is Your Baby in English. We already shared in the comments the link where you can get your free consultation by phone if you wish to do so. Maybe right now you are still not sure if this course or if this program, if this course of action is right for you and your family, and we can help you with that, right, Janet?
Well, of course, I think that it is our experience before parents arrive here that whether they're the mother of a 12-month-old Veras kid, or the mother of an 8-year-old midbrain injured kid, or the mother of a kid who was diagnosed autistic or having developmental delay, that pretty much our parents have been around the block many times.
Yes.
That we're not the first stop on that journey, and often we're the last stop on that journey. That parents, by the time they arrive here, they feel pretty much abandoned. And abandoned because their goal is for their child to get better. It's not their goal to have palliative care. It's not their goal to institutionalize their child or medicate their child. It's not their goal to be a chauffeur and drive their child to 4 different therapies every week and watch him not change. That's not the goal for our parents. They want their kids to change. And that's what we're all about. It's what we're all about. Everything we do, we want our kids to change. We not only want them to change, we want them to change every day.
Janet,
Every day.
I just want to add a little bit of something. We have here somebody asking how, kind of the same question as Giselle. How soon is too soon? Can they get there while the baby is very young? Can they get there while they are? I remember that you said that we have had mothers pregnant that already know that their child is going to be born with trisomy 21. So could you add up a little bit? And this will be the last question to answer.
Well, I love the question, because one of the mothers are told, as Sarah's mother was told, to have an amniocentesis.
Mhm.
And and I know, when parents are recommended to have an amniocentesis, I would say 99% of the time, the motivation is to find the baby and then recommend termination.
Sure.
I don't think that amniocentesis is recommended for benign purposes. I think it's recommended because, for whatever reason, the insane world that we live in thinks the world would be better without these gorgeous, gorgeous kids. But our mothers brilliantly have taken that advice to have the amniocentesis, and they, by and large, do have it. And then when they say, oh, bad news, you're going to have a trisomy 21 kid, when should we schedule your abortion? And mother says, no, no, I'll get on the waiting list at the institutes today. So to see mothers actually enrolled in our course before the baby is born, what a thrill that is. What a thrill. It's a wonderful thing.
It is. Our families are wonderful families. They have their heads and their hearts in the right places.
And, I think in this way, the parents of trisomy 21 babies are especially strong and especially wonderful, because most parents don't know they're going to have a hurt kid. They have a hurt kid and they're brave and tough. But the trisomy 21 parents make a decision.
Yes.
They make a decision and they say, no, no one's taking this kid away. This is our kid. And if he has problems, we'll deal with the problems. If he has special things we need to do for him, we'll do it. But he's our kid. And boy, the rewards for those parents are gigantic. For the brothers and sisters of these kids, the rewards are gigantic, because the world has it upside down. The world says the kid is going to cost you money. The kid is going to make your family life miserable. He's going to take your, it's all rubbish. And parents find the opposite, that these kids are really a gift, truly a gift that brings something, as this family said, she took us from an ordinary family
To
to being
extraordinary.
an extraordinary family. And boy, is that ever true.
Where here it goes for all the extraordinary families out there listening to this live conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today. And please join us back again for another live conversation. Janet, when is it going to happen? The next one.
Well, I'm hoping next Friday at 2:00, if I can make it happen.
We have an appointment there. We will try to make it happen. Please be on the watch out. And of course, all these conversations stay here. So if you want to recommend it to a friend, feel free to forward it to him or her. Feel free to watch it as many times as you like. And please, please, please keep posting your questions. Even if we're not live, when you watch this video, we will take a look at your question and we will do our best to answer your questions in upcoming conversations. Janet, you have the last word to say goodbye to our families.
Well, I hope it's not goodbye. I hope we're going to be seeing you again. And your feedback is critical to us. There's nothing you could tell us that we don't want to know. And your proposals, your suggestions, we will incorporate them into our future webinars. So hurry back.
Hurry back.
Now and then, behave. Fix your kid.
Hurry back and see you very soon. Thank you, Janet, and thank you, everyone out there. Until next time.